Hi, I'm Dan Behrman. You're listening to Catholic versus Other.
So who are you, what do you believe, and how did you come to believe it?
Well, who am I? Good question. I mean, I've been wondering about that for many years, but I am who I am. That I know. What is it? I'm not so sure, but whereas it mattered a lot many years ago, it doesn't matter as much anymore. So I pretty much flow with whoever it is that I am, and I feel much more at peace with it than I have before. So I can say, wow, I'm amazed that I'm pretty satisfied with who I am, even though I'm not too satisfied with what surrounds me. Let's put it that way. I basically have been working with music and the messages that music conveys ever since I can remember in various ways. I think I've done just about everything that can be done in the field of music except publishing, which was dumb because publishing is where you really make the money, but I don't know, it's too complicated. It's a drag, and it also has very little to do with music. Mm-hmm. So I used to play. I had a band. I operated a coffee house. I was a sound man. I was a road manager, a tour director, a technician, an MC. I was a booker. I was a manager. I was a recording engineer. I've been involved in radio since 1975, first with pirate radio stations in France, and that's when I lived in the States, so I used to mail them monthly cassettes. And then I joined an amazing station in New Jersey called WFMU, which in 1966 basically invented the concept of freeform radio, and that's where I learned, quote unquote, my trade. And I did shows on FMU for 14 years, and at the same time went on tour. I was seldom at home, and things were quite exciting, going really well. Was able to develop new kinds of music in the States. I mean, musical forms that were unheard of, that is, music coming from foreign countries, because at the time, music in languages other than English were very hard to come by, whether on stage or on the radio, that is, outside of ethnic communities. And so I was part of that world music introduction movement, and did really well. I mean, was able to develop bands from various countries that were known in their own countries but totally unknown in North America, and we were able to make a name for ourselves and have a real career. And that was not only exciting, but it was also rewarding in the sense that I could see that we could make a difference, and it's good for people to be aware that there are other cultures out there, and it teaches them other ways of thinking, of seeing things, and it opens them up to all sorts of avenues. So I felt that what I was doing radio-wise and in my profession was useful. I felt I was participating in helping my fellow citizens go up instead of down. I also wound up programming the biggest jazz festival in the world, Montreal International Jazz Festival, as well as the Francofolies of Montreal, which is the largest Francophone festival, and that was also great. We made a difference. And then I went to Radio Canada and CBC, where I produced and hosted blues, world music, and jazz and space music shows at the rate of 3 a week for 6 years, and things went really, really well. At the same time, I was writing, and I still am, writing for a magazine, basically review albums. But to all ends and purposes, I'm retired, although I'm open to ideas and suggestions. I still work with the band, but the profession has changed, so things are quite different. And it was always hard, but now it's almost impossible. I mean, because everything is digital, everything is on the net. There's hardly any record labels anymore. Radio stations don't play rare forms of music anymore. And then touring is a nightmare since 9/11. Between getting visas and security checks, and so it's a nightmare.
It's a different world. I want to take you back all the way back to your childhood, from then till now, because I used to listen to you just an Immigrant on CKUT, Student Radio Montreal. You were sort of a voice of hope and justice for the underdog. That's the impression I got, sort of struggling to bring a message of hope against all odds. It was sort of a romantic atmosphere that I felt when I was listening to you.
Well, romanticism comes from the fact that I was born in France and I grew up there. I had a very dramatic mother. She was Ukrainian and she was Jewish, so her and her father and her brother had to basically flee from various countries as there were pogroms and, Jews weren't very welcome. Maybe that's where the drama came from.
Was your father also Jewish? Or?
Yeah. Although he was not from Ukraine, he was from New York. And he was much more happy-go-lucky. He enlisted for World War II, and he was a journalist and he was an interpreter. Well, my father grew up in New York. His parents were not religious.
Do you know if they were Sephardic or Ashkenazi?
Ashkenaz, because my ancestors are all Russian.
Okay.
So my father really had nothing to do with the Jewish religion. And it's funny because later on, he and my mother put me in, when I was 12, put me in a religious Jewish boarding school near Paris. And my father wanted me to be bar mitzvahed because he never had. So I had to deal with all the crap, because I hated it. My mother was not religious either. Her father was a well-known Zionist writer in Ukraine who spent many years in jail because of his writings. And basically they came from Odessa on the Black Sea, and they had to leave because of the pogroms. And they went to Germany, and then she moved to France at the beginning of the war. But she was able to escape. But at that time, she had married a man from Latvia who was living in Paris. And that man, just like my grandfather, was very involved in political Zionist activities. But none of these people from my family were religious. They were politicos, but politicos are not religious. They were Jews. And they knew they were Jews because it was dangerous to be Jewish. At that time, you could lose your life because you were Jewish. But they were fighters.
So this is informing your character growing up. Do you maintain to this day a sympathy for the Zionist movement or not?
No, I'm not a Zionist.
You never were, or?
No. My mother was. My mother eventually wound up living in Israel. She died there.
Okay.
So we were not religious in our family, but I remember for Hanukkah, my father had built a menorah
Okay.
And so they'd light the candles, for Hanukkah, and I'd get presents. But, my friends all had Christmas trees. And I wanted a Christmas tree, because it was much prettier than a menorah. And my mother would tell me, no, we don't do Christmas trees here. We do menorahs. And so my sister moved to Israel when I was 8 years old, in 1958. And the first time my sister came back to visit, she said, okay, well, it's Friday, so it's Shabbos, so we're going to light the candles. She taught us the prayer, the Shabbos prayer. We didn't eat kosher at home or anything, but after she left, my mother kept that ritual going. So every Friday night, light the candles. But the rest of the night and on Saturday, we would do what, we would live normally, because religious Jews don't work on Shabbos. Ultra-religious Jews don't turn on the light or turn it off or light the stove or work or touch money. We led a normal life. So it was just, I think...
connection to
my sister and maybe to Israel. I couldn't care less. I mean, it didn't bother me, but I wasn't crazy about it either,
Did it ever occur to you that maybe you were created by an all-good God and that all this religious talk has some basis?
Well, as I said, my parents were not, my mother was she was a philosopher, she was very Cartesian, and I guess my father too, no, they didn't believe in God.
But when you were laying in bed at night, having witnessed some of the good and evil that's obviously in the world, did you ever think that there's a spiritual choice that you would need to make for good or for evil, or...?
The way I was educated and kids were educated in France, basically you always had to be fearful of something, which means that given that I wasn't quote unquote a good boy most of the time, I could always expect some sort of a punishment. So if it wasn't from my parents or my professors, it'd have to be from some sort of a divine entity, so I'd go to hell or something.
You had these thoughts, or?
Sure, of course, because I was credulous, I was dumb, I believed what I was being told.
Okay. Would you ever reach out in prayer to God?
Yeah, I have, and sure, I remember when... when my ass was about to get fired, I'd pray.
You're talking about the punishment?
That, or getting kicked out of a school, or failing an exam, or being found out for one reason or another because of something that I had or hadn't done, but I would still be accused for it. Sure, of course.
Did you always feel like you wanted to be on the side of justice and goodness? Was that an impulse that you had growing up?
Well, I didn't want to get in trouble, but I always got in trouble.
Yeah. But was there a turning point, maybe in adolescence or after, or early adulthood?
Yeah, well, something happened to me actually on New Year's Eve, 1969, 1970. I took my first acid trip. I was 19. And it wasn't a good trip. Oh, it was pretty terrible. I took acid about 4 times in my life. I took it 3 more times because I wanted to try to reverse, the pattern. I wanted to have a good trip, because that unleashed some pretty dramatic and fearful reactions where I wound up basically suffering from panic attacks and very high anxiety. At one point, I thought, that God had chosen me to undergo all these hardships in order to teach me something. So I started hanging out, with Buddhists and Zen freaks. Kind of hung out a little bit with Hare Krishna people. I was looking for answers because this was really disturbing me. Because if I slipped, I'd wind up having a panic attack. Well, then that was it. It was the end of the world. I mean, and I would take along with me the 15 musicians I was traveling with worldwide, and that would be plus the 36 Voodoo spirits, because my band was, there were heavy Voodoo practitioners, which taught me a lot, incidentally. Maybe it's the religion I would identify with the most. I was even initiated in the Voodoo in a ceremony in 1992 or 93. I'm still wearing the conch that was given to me back then. So I wear this, I wear a Star of David. So when people ask me what my religion is, I say Voodoo, Voojoo. So because of Voodoo and in their faith in Voodoo, we were able to accomplish things that were just about impossible. And I saw a couple of miracles happen.
Did they ever pressure you to come into the fold?
No. They, as I said, I was initiated because they considered me as one of them. We were family and we were all fighting for the same thing.
Does your initiation involve certain obligations on your part?
No.
You don't need to maintain a certain prayer life or...
No.
Do you practice any voodoo at all, or just for...
No. No, I don't practice anything.
You don't want the power that comes with voodoo?
Well, whether I want it or not, I don't think it's going to make any difference. If things happen, they happen. If they don't, they don't. I do believe in action, reaction. I do believe in karma. At one point, I lived in New York. I lived for 3 months with an Indian Swami, but he turned out to be a quack. But there was a certain discipline. Every morning we'd get up at 5 o'clock and do meditation and yoga. I was terrible at yoga. I wasn't that great at meditation either. It was like trying to meditate on top of a volcano. That's the type of person I am. But the other thing, which has to do with spirituality, I always worked with trance music. I worked with Gnawa musicians, from Marrakesh in Morocco.
Okay.
I worked with the Voodoo roots musicians from Haiti, and their rhythms, which are hypnotic, they induce hypnotic trance, which are spiritually grounded. These are ancestral rhythms that emanate from religious ceremonies.
Okay.
And their aim is to induce a trance. The trance puts you in a state of grace. You are in a close relationship with God to the point where you can be invested by God or by one of his messengers, and you become the voice of God or one of the messengers. I did that when I was in school. I documented Baptist gospel ceremonies. I remember New Year's Eve 72, 73, I went down to Johns Island in South Carolina and recorded the Midnight Watch, which is an 8-hour-long ceremony with people going into trances left and right. And when they're in trance, they are mounted by spirits. And they speak in tongues or they speak in English, and they have messages, and people usually will come to these people when they're possessed and ask questions, about themselves or about some departed ones or about whatever, and they get answers. Same thing in Voodoo.
Did you not find that disturbing on some level, or no?
No, I found that beautiful. I like things that are mysterious. Yeah. I like things that you cannot explain, but where you can see. You can see a reaction, you can see a response, you can see an effect. Whereas in religion, they say, well, if you're a good boy, you go to heaven. If you're a bad boy, you go to hell. Well, yeah, come on,
I don't feel a lot of mystical stuff when I go to church, but I have faith and I believe everything the church teaches. And so when I go to church and that bread gets transubstantiated into the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, I'm experiencing something that's mystical, but I'm not having a light show and audio-visual experience or tears or hair standing on end or anything. Just pure faith, I believe. And I think that's the way it is for most Western Catholics.
Well, dig this. Very often, some band members will go into trance during the show, and they'd get possessed. So they would become a spirit. and they would have all the attributes of the Spirit. And one of them, and I know him really well because I've known him since he's 12 years old when he joined the band. And I was there the first time that he went into trance, that he got possessed. And he got possessed by a spirit, a loa, by the name of Zaka. Zaka is the spirit of farming, agriculture. And Zaka is an old man, and he's got a club foot. And he starts the show, he's normal, he's himself. Then all of a sudden, in the middle of the show, he goes into trance and bang! Not only does he go into trance, he gets possessed. He gets mounted by a spirit. And the spirit happens to be Zaka, because all of a sudden he's limping, he's got a club foot, and his face, he's a kid, but he had the face of an old man. And in order to let themselves known as to who they are in terms of spirit, each spirit has a special handshake. And he's giving me this handshake. And he tells me in Creole, say, you have a lot of courage. You have a lot of courage. And then he breaks and he goes back on stage. And I felt that like a lightning bolt had hit me, you know. I got all this energy that came into me, that took a hold of me. And I felt like Superman, you know. And I kept that energy for the 3 remaining months of the tour. And I needed that energy. So, you know, I saw those manifestations. I saw one time in Long Island, here we are, and the band is playing, and one of them, the band leader, goes into trance and is mounted by a spirit, and there she is on the stage, on the floor, you know, acting like she's having an epileptic seizure, you know. That's what happens when you're in trance. And then she gets up, and she has become somebody else. She's transformed. And then later on, she goes back into herself, and so on. But there's a woman from Texas, a white woman, who's there in the audience with her husband. She goes into trance. And so we took her backstage in the dressing room, and she was just coming out of it. And they took care of her, they coached her, they told her what was happening, and she was a painter, and it changed her painting. The way she started painting again was totally different. It was free-flowing, it was totally liberated, it was, and she made a career out of it. So I saw spirituality very often, and there were a couple of times where I was close, and I wished that it would happen to me. I figured that will liberate me, that will get rid of this paranoia, you know, this inherent fear that I have. And it didn't happen, you know, and I felt bad for it. In a way, I felt relieved. I didn't lose control.
Yeah.
But I felt bad because I wished I had lost control, because that could have opened, you know, many other doors of perception. Because there's still one thing that I'm afraid of, and especially since I'm getting closer to it, because of the years, I'm afraid of dying.
Mm. Do you have any hope about an afterlife?
No. I think that somehow we wind up in the same dimension as where we were before we were born.
Okay.
You know, and if I was able to survive my birth, who knows, maybe I can survive my death.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I don't know if I want to survive my death, because it's going to be a pretty sorry sight. There's a whole bunch of people out there that I really wouldn't want to meet.
Okay. What do you think of the Christian idea that all the accounts get settled and justice is established in heaven? And
the Last Judgment? That's bullshit.
It doesn't appeal to you?
No, not at all. I think that's another, you know, organized religions and the way they're set up, it's a control thing, you know, to get people to do what was wanted by the ruling class. And at that time, the priests were the ruling class.
But if you just think about heaven in the abstract, and never mind the abuses of men on earth, does it not appeal to you? Never-ending joy and bliss and fulfillment?
No, I aspire to eternal bliss, you know, peace, nothing, that's peace. Because otherwise, you wind up in a dimension where everything is, so supposedly beautiful, but you still have to interact. You still have to come on, I've had a life of that. It's fine. I don't know what I believe in or if I believe in. I think there's just you die and that's it. I don't believe in being judged, by a divine tribunal. That's too human. That's too hokey. That's too easy. It doesn't work that way. And if it worked that way, we would have been obliterated a long time ago, because we got away with, and we're still getting away with, so much horror on a daily basis. What happens in this world, what has happened historically, with all the genocides and crazy lunatics, nasty people ruling certain countries. I mean, God's out to lunch, man.
I can understand how you'd say that, but it's easy to identify sort of hell on earth, but what have been the moments in your life where you've experienced firsthand a little taste of heaven, where there was peace, there was bliss, there was joy?
I've experienced that not very often, a couple of times. Okay. And it always happened. I never had to work for it.
It was spontaneous.
Yeah, I don't know. I might be in front of a beautiful natural scenery, like I don't know, sunset or sunrise, or in front of a
beautiful woman.
No, not a woman, because it's too focused and there's interaction. And no, it's got to be grandiose, it's got to be big. It's got to be bigger than you. Not that I'm bigger than a woman, but a woman hasn't been bigger than me. I mean, yeah, I have put certain women on a pedestal in my life, but that wasn't a good thing. I paid a dear price for it, so I don't do that anymore. But you don't put, a majestuous landscape on a pedestal. It's just there, and you're hit by it, by its magnitude, and where I felt totally at peace with the world and with myself. It's happened a few times. These are fleeting moments. It did not last for hours.
But there might be a lingering sort of peace or
until the next thing happens.
Yeah.
So I know it exists,
Yeah.
And
but do you see a possibility of attaining that state more regularly, or?
Well, I'm not a sadhu. I'm not a Zen monk. I'm not a monk. So I don't have the discipline for that. But then again, I mean, I've seen people who have been striving their entire life to achieve perfection, and basically life has passed them by, and they're not necessarily happy. In fact, a lot of them can be like dried prunes, but that's because they have used a lot of rigor, too much discipline, self-discipline.
A formulaic approach to life.
Yeah, and especially amongst Western practitioners. It's different with Africans, people from the West Indies,
Asians, maybe.
India, Asia. I don't know. I've been to Japan. I found it to be a really sick society. It turned me off totally. I mean, they were so regimented. They were like a bunch of ants. No personality.
What is it about freedom? The message I'm getting from you seems to center on freedom, and it's very important to me. For me, God is freedom, and the ultimate freedom is being with God in heaven. And there's a freedom in morality. There's a freedom in doing God's will, not my own will. You don't have religion, but I think you still strive for freedom. It seems to be coming across that is really central to your worldview. Are you consciously aware of a quest for freedom?
Well, I know that this has been the common denominator in my life. That's what has motivated me ever since I'm little. I didn't necessarily formulate it like that, But if I look back, at all the things I took flack for in my life, and I took a lot, if I look back at all the things I fought for and against, if I look at the way I see the world, what it's doing and what it's not doing, I'm the same person I was when I was rebelling, when I was 10 years old, 15, 20. I'm the same person, and I still have those ideals.
There's a sort of don't rock the boat attitude that comes with the status quo mentality. And I think Jesus was rebelling against that, and he was showing us the way to live is to be spontaneous, be yourself, be generous, be in the world, be present. This is the message of Jesus Christ. And it sounds very much like you would agree with that, and that you are rebelling constantly against the alternatives, which are all protectionist, which are all hunkering down in order to secure something, which at the end of the day doesn't feed your soul, right?
Especially these days when religion is used in the way in which it never was designed to be used, and people are killing in the name of religion. Muslims are killing Muslims because some of them are supposedly infidels, and they're fighting conflicts that date back to several centuries ago. And what they're doing to people is got nothing to do with religion. These people are monsters. But Christians have done it just the same, In most of the colonized world, rifles were quickly followed by crucifix-bearing priests, who basically forced people to convert, whether it was in Africa or in South America, because the savages had to be Christianized. So I have a hard time with that kind of religion.
I don't know if you remember, Jesus was walking with John and James, and John said, that village we just came from wasn't doing things right. Do you want us to bring down fire and destroy the village? And Jesus rebuked them. It's a sort of fanaticism with religion that's easy to fall into. But Jesus didn't stand for that. He didn't stand for that. He didn't tolerate that.
But I have to tell you that as far as I'm concerned, Jesus was a man. He was a human being. He was not God. That, to me, that is totally...
If you believed otherwise, you'd be Christian. Right?
I don't know. See, in the Jewish religion, you don't have... you have a few prophets.
Is Judaism your favorite religion?
No.
You don't have a favorite, or?
Voodoo.
Okay. Yeah. I have to admit, I'm very cautious about every religion that's not my own, because I believe that I belong to the one true religion, that everything else is departing from the fullness of the truth. If two religions disagree about something, they can't both be right. They could both be wrong, but they can't both be right. So I think the fullness of truth resides in the Roman Catholic Church. And I would hope that an Orthodox Jew feels the same way about his worldview, and that the atheist feels the same way about his worldview, and that the Voodoo practitioner feels the way about his worldview.
The Orthodox Jew, or Orthodox anyone, automatically has his vision obliterated because of his orthodoxy. That will build walls because that community does not want to be corrupted by what's different from them, by the world. Even here in Montreal, in Outremont, you have different sects in the Jewish Orthodox community that don't agree with the same principles, and they are against one another. Well, they don't fight it out with their fists, but they don't see eye to eye, and quite often they don't speak to one another. It's terrible. Talk about freedom. No, I'd say that's pretty limiting. My religion, in a way, dooms me, because being a Jew, I'm automatically discriminated against by some people.
By being a cultural Jew?
By being born a Jew. I didn't decide to be born a Jew. I mean, if I could have decided, I would have been born nothing at all, you know. Let me choose later on if I want to, if I need to. But in the country, in the city where I was born, if I had been born 6 years before, I could have been killed because I was a Jew. Some of my relatives died in the camps. Some of my relatives were shot on the street just because they were Jewish. That was their only quote-unquote crime. That kind of limits one's freedom, I would say. I was discriminated against in France. I was called a dirty kike a few times. I was beaten up a few times. I remember the first time I was called a dirty kike, a sale juif, in school. I must have been, 7 years old. And a kid punched me in the face, But I remember one time I was in a boarding school. It was a Catholic boarding school, one of the many crazy places my parents put me in. And we were in the shower, and I was the only one who was circumcised. And I don't know, about 6 or 7 of them ganged up on me, and they kicked my ass. And they're spitting at me and kicking me and punching me. And
if all else is equal, which Catholic is more Catholic? The one that would engage in that violent, hateful behavior, or the one that would be kind and loving to you?
But as far as I'm concerned, these people weren't Catholics. They were morons.
I'm glad you can make the distinction between a Catholic and a moron. But
no, not all Catholics are like that. And I've met some stupid Jews too. My religion is no religion. I like spirituality. That's universal. Some people have it, some don't.
What if you found out that...
But what about all these people who go to church every week, or the synagogue, and or the church, because Catholic religion is the only one where you can confess all of your sins.
Sacramentally, yeah.
And so they come out of there, feeling all giddy, and they keep doing their nasty,
You're not supposed
nasty
to.
things during the following week, and until the following Sunday we get absolved again.
You're not supposed to. It's one thing to fall because you're weak. It's another thing to plan on it. Like The Simpsons did an episode where Bart turned Catholic, and he went into the confessional laughing and saying, "Well, I'm going to confess this now, and I go out and do the same thing, and I'll come back and get absolved again." This is a complete mockery of the sacrament of confession. You have to change your life. You have to. And if the priest doesn't understand that, then he's been ill-formed, and there are many priests that are ill-formed. And we live in a fallen world. If you're truly contrite, if you know you've done wrong, you acknowledge that you've done wrong, and you confess your sins, it doesn't really matter if you fall into the same bad habit. You've got a bad habit and you fall into the pattern of behavior. That's insignificant. That doesn't matter. That's just because you're a weak idiot. But God loves you. He loves us as we are and as He finds us, but He loves us far too much to leave us as we are and as He finds us.
Well, that's not true. He has left us as we are, because look at how we are.
I see God's hand at work in my life, and how if I cooperate with God, I can change. Because it's like, if you want to think of it like a dance, God is a perfect dancer, and He's the perfect dance teacher, but it takes two to tango. If you're
but humans
refusing
are everything
to cooperate,
but perfect. So as far as I'm concerned, if I live my life towards the quote-unquote advancement of humankind, or myself, or which is the same, then I'm doing God's work.
The way I like to wrap up these interviews always is just let my guest talk directly to the audience. Just as a sort of final thought to wrap up, what would you say to anyone that's listening?
Well, I remember one time, the winter of 1971 going into 1972, I had arrived in New York with $100, a backpack, and my guitar and a dog. And I had found a job peddling flowers on the street. There was one other guy selling flowers too. He was living in a rooming house. He put me up. So I was sleeping on the floor. And one day I tried to commit suicide. I popped a bunch of pills when he wasn't there. And what saved me basically was my dog, who started howling. He figured something was going on. I was going out pretty fast. I managed to drag myself to a telephone in the corridor. It was a public phone. I don't know how the hell I put in the dime, but I called my cousin. And my cousin came, and I could hardly move. He took me down to this French polyclinic, it was called, and where they pumped my stomach. And I remember the next day walking in Central Park in a snowstorm in a state of total despair. And all of a sudden, I raise my eyes and I'm in front of the statue of Lewis Carroll. And on the stand, it's written in quotes, "In the midst of despair, may I never lose hope." And the rest is history. What I mean to say is, I figured that I didn't wind up in front of that statue for nothing, as a coincidence. And whenever things are really, really, really bad, I think of that statue and what's written is still there. Last time I was in New York, I went and I took a photo of it. But basically, just follow your instinct, do what you think is good. Just live your life, be kind, and if you can't be kind, do it kindly. Yeah, I like that. If you can't be kind, do it. Be mean, but do it kindly. So don't do things to others that you wouldn't want done to you. And sure, there's a lot of injustice. There's a lot of stupid and incompetent and unfair people. A lot of things that may revolt you. There are ways to deal with those. They take time. And there's other people who think that way too, so it's a good thing to associate with them and to find a way to resolve those problems, but it doesn't have to be peaceful. What I mean is, don't use weapons, don't enlist in the army, but yeah, demonstrations, public speaking, and so on. That's important, even on Facebook, because people read it. You know, if you get a negative reaction, if you get insults from somebody, well, you know you hit the spot. You know it was worth it, and you can block that person anyway. So we don't have that many means at our disposal, but we have quite a lot. And you know, if we look at the way kings and rulers lived 200 years ago, 100 years ago, we live much better than they do. You know, we have access to much more information. We can do much more things than they did. We are the kings.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is ask.